Hello, can you hear me? Hi, Ivana. Hi, Roxana. Okay, so we are going to start with our class for today. First of all, I would like to say good evening to everyone. So I'm sorry for the delay, but there were some problems here. But we are ready to continue talking about things that are really interesting for you. Okay, and so we are going to start with the topic now, right? So can you hear me well? Do you have any problems? Do you understand me? Hello, Lydia. Hello, Anna, Roxana, Merly. Oh, Ana Grimaldo says, I can't listen. ¿No me puedes escuchar, Ana? Okay, what about the others? Okay, Roxana doesn't have any problems. Hello, Maria Esther Vilches. Good evening. So we are going to start today with our class. And let me introduce the topic for today's class, which is about approaches to teach the new grammatical structures. Okay, this is our topic for today. So in other words, we are going to practice or we are going to learn how to teach grammar using different kind of techniques, methods, or approaches, right? So let's start with the first one today. Let's go to the slide number 2. And here, let me wait, please. Very good, Roxana. You can hear me well. Okay, let's go to the second. I'm sorry. Wait a second. Okay, so this is the first approach that we are going to practice today. Okay, that is presentation, practice, and production. That is called like PPP, right? So have you ever heard about this approach, presentation, practice, and production? Have you ever heard about this? No. Do you have any idea what it is about? This is a kind of approach, students or teachers, colleagues in this case, that you can apply with your students when you want to teach them a new grammatical structure. Did you know anything about PPP or not? I would like to read your, TBL, task-based learning is kind of this activity, but of course it's shorter because TBL is longer than just PPP. But we are going to study TBL as well today in class. Okay, don't you have any ideas about PPP? No? Okay, it doesn't matter. So let me introduce about this topic, okay? This is a kind of approach that you can use, as I told you, with your students when you want to introduce a new structure, I mean grammatical structure, okay? So it has 3 steps, as you can see, the 3 P's. So the first one, that means presentation, is when the teacher introduces a situation. It can be, a grammar topic, maybe a vocabulary topic, okay? Any language you would like to introduce to your students in a lesson. Of course, you have to use the target language, in this case, English, in context. So after you introduce the topic, maybe by giving examples, by giving a conversation, I don't know, by giving any kind of activity you want, you have to make your students practice, all right? In order to know or in order to improve what they learn from you during the presentation, right? So in the second step, that is practice, students practice the target language. Of course, they have to use different kind of techniques, okay, in class, and they have to do something, right? So after they practice, maybe with a, with a practice, with a conversation, with a worksheet, okay, you have to make them produce. How? So, for example, maybe you can make them to write something, or maybe you have to make them say something in English, okay? So it means that they have to produce what they have learned during the lesson plan, okay? So that is the PPP. That's presentation, the teacher introduces the topic. Then after the teacher introduces the topic, the students need to practice. Maybe you can give them some activity, some exercise to be done. And after they finish those exercises, you have to make them produce maybe their own sentences, their own paragraph, okay? It's according to the activity that you are using in the lesson plan. So do you have any questions about the presentation, practice, and production approach? Do you have any questions? Maybe any doubt, or do you need any extra example of how to use this approach in your classes? No questions? Okay, so it means that it's clear. Your silence means for me that it's clear, right? Okay, anyway, let's go to the next slide. About techniques. Okay, depending on the activity that you want to use. Okay, I'm going to give you an example later about using techniques in this kind of approach. Yes? Let's go to the next slide. So presentation, practice, and production, that is the PPP. It is perhaps the most commonly taught and used format. The main idea behind this is that it gives the students the opportunity to learn something in context. Here, the students are learning in context because you are giving them, the information that they need, okay, before producing something. Also, it's important because you can model them. For example, if you present a conversation and inside the conversation there is a grammar structure, so the students are going to be able to do the same thing using the same structure but using their own ideas, okay? And of course, in this kind of approach, the students can practice and the teacher can control the activity, because remember that the students are going to do what the teacher asks them to do. I mean, if they have to make a conversation using a structure that you have taught before, so it means that they will do the same structure, but maybe with their own ideas. Okay? So here there is an example of a PPP class. Let's see the presentation. So you present the topic, okay, explain their characteristics and resolve doubts. For example, if you want to talk about routines, okay, so you can teach the students different activities or different, maybe you can present a conversation about two people talking about their daily routines, okay? So that is the presentation. The students recognize the use of present simple by using that conversation. Okay, that's the presentation. Once you present the topic, the students are going to have an idea, okay, about the topic. So then the students need to practice, okay? So maybe you can give, I don't know, you can give any piece of paper with some activities inside of grammar, I mean with a present simple, so the students need to complete them. So in that case, the students are practicing, right? So after they finish that part, you can make the students maybe to write, to write daily routines just by a short paragraph. So in that case, the students are producing their own ideas, but they have to take into account the words, okay, that you have taught them in the presentation, and maybe the words that they have learned during the practice part. Okay? So I think that this kind of PPP class is very common because this is what we usually do with our students. We present the topic, we give them some material to be completed, and of course at the end they have to produce, they have to do something, right? Okay. So any questions now about PPP class? No? Okay, this is the first, remember, this is the one of the most common approaches that you can use in order to teach grammar. Okay? And remember, PPP means presentation is number one, practice the second, and finally the students need to produce something. Right? Okay, so do you have any questions about this kind of approach? Because this is an approach. Do you have any questions? Nope. No questions. Excellent. So if you don't have any questions, now let's go to a situation, and we have to give some ideas, okay? Give some solutions to this situation, right? Let me read the situation, please. Here it says, Patricia is an English teacher of the second grade high school. She wants to present a topic titled My Last Birthday using the past simple. She doesn't know how to use the PPP method. What should she do? What kind of activities she can take into account to use the PPP? Remember, the topic is my last birthday. So the grammar inside that topic is past simple. So what kind of activities or how can she use the PPP in this lesson? What does she need to do first, then, and finally, in order to get a PPP class? Can you give me some ideas, please? I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to think about that. And maybe you can give me some solutions, okay, in order to help, in this case, Patricia. Right? Come on, please. Do you have any ideas? Okay, could be a dialogue at the very beginning. All right. It can be, okay, the dialogue can be the presentation of the lesson. Okay, very nice. So after the dialogue, what do you have to do? Or what does she need to do? Okay, maybe that's another idea. Maybe in the presentation part, maybe the teacher can use a short text in the past. Maybe about a famous person's last birthday. Okay. It can be part of the presentation. So what about in the practice part? No more ideas? Come on, please. I know that you are very creative teachers. So that's your opportunity to show me that. Okay, exercises about filling gaps. Okay, it can be at the beginning, present the topic, complete sentences, and then practice. Um, okay, let's read what Giovanna Rosa says. I'll put a picture from a big cake and make a brainstorm about what they did on their last birthday and then write about actions in the past. Of course, in the presentation, you can use any kind of visual aids. You can use a conversation, you can use a dialogue, you can use a reading, but remember that this part is just the presentation or the introduction of the lesson. Once they get familiarized with the topic, I mean with the new words, okay, with the tense, you have to make the students practice. Maybe they have to complete some sentences or they have to read a text, yes, and they have to answer some questions. It's up to the skill that you want to develop during the lesson. Once they practice, maybe you have to make them write just a paragraph about the things that they did on her or his last birthday. It can be another idea, you know? So there are plenty of ideas that you can use, but here the most important is to know that one of the approaches that you can apply with grammar lessons is the PPP, that is the most common one. That means you have to introduce the topic, you have to make them practice by giving extra material. It can be orally, written, reading part, depending on the activity and the skill that you want to develop. And finally, they have to do something. They have to produce, maybe by orally or maybe by, by written form, but they have to produce something using their own ideas. That's the point. Okay? Very nice. Do you have any questions about the PPP? Okay, yes. For example, as Giovanna says, first you present it or you show a big picture of a cake. So the students are starting brainstorming different words related to that picture. Okay? So after that, you can maybe put a conversation about two people. Maybe one of them is talking about his or her last birthday, or maybe a reading of a person with the activities that he or she did on his or her last birthday. And then you can give some materials for them to be completed. And finally, they have to write their own paragraph about the things that they did on their last birthday. It can be another idea. Very good, Giovanna. You have good ideas. Okay, so that's all about PPP. So before closing that topic, do you have any questions? I think it's the most common one, right? We usually use this, but we didn't know the name of this approach. But now you did. So you know the approach, the name of the approach, right? Okay, so if you don't have any questions about this part, we are going to go to our second approach for today's lesson. Okay, that is called task-based approach or TBL, task-based learning. It has the same meanings. There are different kind of names, but one of the most common is task-based approach or task-based learning. So here it has 3 steps like the PPP, but in fact, the second stage or the second step has more activities to be done. Okay? So here you have a picture. For example, the task-based approach is divided into 3 parts. The first one is the pre-task. Remember that here you have to use different kind of tasks. So the students are going to complete tasks given by the teacher. For example, in the pre-task, is the introduction to topic and task. So you introduce the topic, similar to the PPP, right? You present the topic maybe through a dialogue, through a conversation, through a reading, okay? Whatever material you want to use with them. So after you introduce the topic, you have the task cycle that is divided into 3 parts. The task, the activity that the students have to do. Planning, it means that they have to plan how to complete the activity. And of course, the report. That means, in this case, the final outcome of the activity. So once they finish that part, they go to the last stage that is called language focus. So what does it mean? We are, in this case, or in this stage, the students are going to analyze if the activities that they have done before were right or not. And finally, they will be able to practice in order to clarify any problems that they had before. Yes? Very simple or a little difficult? Let me show you in the next stage, okay, to make it clearer, right? So a task-based learning activity. Step number 1, that is the pre-task. You introduce the topic and task. Pre-teach vocabulary and expressions. Most of the task-based learning activities are used for a speaking part, but inside those activities, you can include the grammar activities as well. So let's start again. So step number 1 is the pre-task. You introduce the topic. You can pre-teach vocabulary, expressions, grammar structures, okay? But remember that you don't have to teach directly and you will say, today we have to practice present simple. Present simple is blah, blah, blah. No. You have to give them examples. That's the best idea to teach English, okay? Because if you just give rules, the students will get bored, okay? And this is something that we don't want from our students. So once you introduce the topic in any kind of activities or techniques that you like to use with your students, we have to go to the second step, that is the task cycle. So what does it mean here? Here, after you present the topic, the students are going to do a task. Any task given by the teacher. Remember that you have to give the task to the student. Maybe they have to work in pairs. Maybe they have to work in groups. It's according to the activity, okay, that you want to do in your lesson. So in the task cycle, of course, they have to prepare everything. They have the task, they have to plan how to do it, and they have to show the result or the activity or the task completed. Right? So once they finish that part, so they are ready for the next step, which is language focus. So here, maybe they have to make the presentation of their work. So with the teacher's help, they are going to see if the work is okay. Maybe there are some mistakes that we need to correct. All right. So if they don't, maybe if the activities that they have done are not clear, or maybe they need extra more practice, that's the chance to present another activity and you can give them more practice. Okay, Eric, I have a question. Can you tell me what is the main difference between both? Okay, you mean between the PPP and the task-based learning? So the difference is that, remember that in the first activity, in the PPP approach, the activities are not so difficult and there are not many stages to be done because you just present the topic, you give some materials. Maybe here they don't need to do a task, a specific task, and they don't have to work in groups. Maybe they have to do it by themselves individually. And finally, they have to produce something. It's very short, there are not many things that they have to do. But when you have a task-based learning activity, it means that from the very beginning, you are going to introduce the task. Until the end of the lesson, they have to do tasks. I mean, during the whole lesson, the students are going to be able to do tasks. That's the big difference. And of course, the TVL has more stages and is more complex than the first one. Okay, Erica? Yeah, that's why I told you the PPP is the most common, because this is something that we usually do with our students. Yes, PPP is, of course, you have the presentation. That is we can say the motivation of the lesson, right? So after that, you have the process, So maybe you make the students practice. And finally, you have the ending of the lesson, that is extra material, or maybe they have to produce something. That means the lesson plan, actually. Yes. Okay, do you have any questions about PPP or TVL? Remember that TVL activity is more complex, and here what you want is to make students work together, not to work isolated. Here the main idea is that everybody in the group has something that they need to do together in order to complete the whole task. Yes? Okay, here there is another explanation about the about the task-based learning approach. So for example, here we have the pre-task. This is the first part. That is the introduction to topic and task. So here the teacher explores topic with the class, helps students to understand instructions and prepare. So once the teacher introduces the topic, so we have to go to the second stage that has 3 pre-stages as well. That's the task. Here, the students do the task in pairs, remember, or small groups. And the teacher, of course, monitors the activity. So they have to get together in order to do the task. So when they get together, of course, they need to planning. Here, students prepare to report to the whole class. It can be orally or written form, how they did the task, what they decided or discovered, right? So, and finally, in the second stage, you have the report. Some groups present the reports to the class or exchange written reports and compare results, right? Like the report. So once the students finished the second part, we have to go to the last, and for me, I think it's the most important part, because here the students and the teacher work together in order to solve any situations or any problems. Here we have the language focus. So here we have the analysis. Students see or examine and discuss specific features, right? And the practice. Teacher conducts practice of new words or phrases and patterns that occur in the data. I'm going to give you an example, okay, to make this more clear, right? Let me give you an example, okay? So for example, you want to talk about, let's see, you want to talk about likes and dislikes, okay? So for your pre-task, you can present maybe a conversation about the things that people like and dislike. Yes? So in the conversation that you present to your students, you want to emphasize on some of the questions. that you have in the conversation. In that case, you are introducing the topic, right? So once you do that, you are going to emphasize, okay, on the questions. You have to put emphasis on the questions that you present in the conversation. Maybe there are like 5 questions, okay? So what is the next part, the task? So you make students to get together, group of 4 or 5 students, according to the students that you have in your classroom, and you are going to give them some papers with the questions that you use in the introduction part. So they have to work together. Maybe they need to ask the questions to each other, and maybe they have to present, a paper with the results. Yes, using the statistical, maybe results. How many people like, for example, watching movies? Maybe three people of the 5 students in the group. Okay, they have to make the presentation. Okay, yes? Very nice. After that, the students are going to plan to do the activity. They have to work together, right? And then, of course, after they have the results, they have to report. Maybe they have to write in a big paper the results, and they have to make a presentation in front of the others. That's the report part. Okay? So while the students are making their presentation, the others and the teacher are going to check if the presentation that they are making is right or not. Yes? So then, if there are some mistakes, with the teacher's help, they are going to correct them. Okay? And that's all. That's the task-based learning approach. But in each part of this lesson, the students need to work in the task. Okay? The task is the same from the very beginning until the end. Right? Any questions? Nope. Does it make sense to you? Is it clear? Yes, here remember that the teacher is just a monitor. I mean, you just walk around the classroom, okay, in order to see how they work. But you don't have to interfere their work. Your hard work is almost at the end of the lesson, because you are going to correct what they have done, but at the end, okay? And of course, you are just a guide. Maybe if they need any help, they will ask you some questions, but you don't have to interfere in everything that they have to do during the task cycle. Okay, you can use this kind of approach, especially with the students of 4th and 5th grade. I remember that when I studied my master, I made my presentation about this topic, and it really works. Yes, it's very effective, because you make students speak all the time, and you make students to have or to improve their communicative skills, because sometimes it's difficult to ask questions and to answer with your partners. So this kind of approach is very, very effective, especially with the students of 4th and 5th grade, and if you want to make them speak more, because the objective of task is to make them speak more instead of writing. Remember that we can combine different methods and approaches. We don't have to do the same thing over and over, because the students get bored, Maybe one day you can apply one approach, and another day you can do another thing. Try to make your lessons different, because if you repeat the same thing, so students are not going to learn a lot, because they are These kind of lessons are not going to be meaningful for them. So try to change, try to innovate. Maybe you can take some parts from this and other parts from the other thing, and you can get together. So, it's up to us. But I think that, of course, you need to start with the PPP first, and little by little you can introduce the task-based learning approach, because it's more difficult. Here, for the task-based learning approach, the students need to think, need to know how to work together. It is not just to know English. Here they need to, how can I say, they need to develop their collaborative skills as well, right? Okay, so let's go with the next slide. And here, let's help Juan. Juan has a problem. He's a teacher as us. Juan is an English teacher of the 5th grade high school. He would like to teach, how do you feel when you, blah, blah, blah. The topic inside here is feelings, based on the task-based learning. How can he do? Could you help him? Okay, so remember, the topic is about feelings. How do you feel when you blah, blah, blah? He wants to use the task-based learning approach in his lesson plan. So how can he do it? Remember that we have 3 different stages. The pre-task, that is the introduction. We have the task cycle. So inside the task cycle, we have the task, the planning, and the reports. And finally, we have the language focus, that is the analysis and the extra practice, if needed, right? So tell me some possible solutions or some ideas to help Juan. Do you have any idea? I would like to hear from you, or at least I would like to read from you, because here there is no other way to communicate just by seeing what you are writing, right? Now, don't you have any ideas about how he can start his lesson plan? No? No ideas? Yes, Rosa. They will do it, but they will not do it today. They will do it tomorrow. Okay, how do you feel when you know an interesting person? Okay. Or how do you feel when you study English? Or how do you feel when you listen to romantic music? So how can you start the topic? Most of the time, I think that the easiest way to introduce the topic in task-based learning is by giving them a conversation. Because through the conversations, you can start identifying the questions, right? Okay, and once they understand the questions that you introduce in the conversation, it would be easier for them to do the other activities, right? Because they know about the topic. So after you present a conversation with some questions related to feelings, okay, what do they have to do? What comes next? Tell me. I would like to hear from you. Come on, please, colleagues. Ana, Celso, Erika, Stella, Rosa, Giovanna, Javier, Lidia, Maria, Merly, Miguel, and Roxana Chavez. Okay, you can make them to form groups, as you said. Okay, what kind of materials you can give them? Okay, maybe they have to work in pairs and what? Working in pairs or in groups, according to the amount of students you have in the classroom, right? Okay, so but what do they have to do in pairs? What kind of task? Give me the activity. Okay, but remember that they have to recognize the grammar in the introduction, because in the second part, that is the task cycle, they need to know what they have to do. Because if they start recognizing the grammar in the second part, so it will take more time for them to complete the task. What happened after liked or hate? Okay. But maybe this kind of questions, Erika, teacher, would present the vocabulary first, then in works sort of worksheet, and then the presentation and reflection of the language gist. Okay, Erika has a good idea. Let's read her information. You can present the vocabulary first. Okay. Then you can work in groups. Maybe they can solve a worksheet given by the teacher, possible. And then the presentation. Okay, the presentation of the worksheet. Maybe just one of the students, or maybe all of them are going to go to in front of the classroom and they have to make the presentation of the worksheet. Maybe they are going to give the answers. Okay, you can present different worksheets in the different groups. All right, then you can, of course, you can make a reflection. You can maybe correct any possible mistakes. That's a good idea. Complete a text with adjectives sad and happy. Okay, maybe they have to do that in the very beginning part. Yes. And students share information about feeling in different situations. All right, and maybe they can write maybe a paragraph about the most important situations that they have faced in their life when they were very, very happy, for example. And they can write everything in a, in a big paper. All right. Yes, you have different kind of ideas. Very nice. Here, the most important is to know that the task-based learning has 3 stages as the PPP, but the big difference here is that students in this part work together almost in all the lesson plan. Yes? Okay, very nice. So if we finish with this part, we have to go to our next part. Because of the time, we have now to talk about techniques to teach vocabulary. How can you teach vocabulary? You just go to the classroom and say, okay, students, look at the pictures. Today we are going to study about occupations. Do you think it's a good way to introduce vocabulary to our students? Or how can you think it would be better to do it? How can you introduce, or how can you teach vocabulary to your students? What do you do? Do you just write words on the board and you make them repeat? Do you bring some flashcards? How? How can you introduce or teach vocabulary? That's the next question for you. By showing images or pictures, flashcards, bead cards, posters, okay? What else? Yes, most of the time we use pictures, right? Because as we know, our students are more visual nowadays. Okay, but not just pictures. Drillings, very nice. You can present drillings. Do you remember? We studied drillings as well. Excellent. Yes, through videos, pictures, realia. Remember that real objects are realia. So realia is another, and I think it's one of the most effective way to teach vocabulary because it's more meaningful for them. Okay, very nice. At least, sorry, you have an idea about teaching vocabulary. So let me show you something that is part of the topics that you are going to have in your exam this Sunday. So one of the techniques that you can use with your students is called word recognition. So here, what does it mean? It is not picture recognition, it's word recognition. So it is a process of determining the meaning and pronunciation of a word. And here it is the ability of the students to develop automaticity when reading isolated words. So in other words, is when the students recognize the word, they know the meaning, they know maybe the function of the word. So that is called word recognition. Yes? Here there is an example. Examples of word recognition. Edison made his students read a text about international festivals. The students have to circle all the adjective and underline all the nouns in the text. So if the students have to do that, they need to know which words are adjective and which words are nouns. So in that case, the technique that the teacher is using is word recognition. Yes? Very simple. Do you use this kind of technique in your lessons? Do you make students to circle, to underline verbs, or maybe actions, activities? Do you make them do this kind of activities? Okay, very nice. That's a good kind of technique. The name of that technique is word recognition. Please try to remember, especially because maybe in the exam you will have an example like this, and maybe you need to recognize the correct technique. So in this case, it's word recognition. Yes? Okay, let me show you here a situation. Rosa has a problem. Let's help Rosa. Word recognition technique. Oh, Rosa or Ruby, I'm sorry. So Ruby is an English teacher of the second grade of high school. She wants to use the word recognition technique in her lesson plan about action verbs. Could you help her? How do you think is the best idea for her to use the technique by taking into account the use of word recognition? What does she have to do? Okay, remember that her lesson plan is about action verbs. So how does she apply the word recognition technique in her lesson? How can she do it? Can you give me some ideas? What kind of activities she can do? No? Don't you have any ideas? I would like to see your ideas, please. No? How can she use that word recognition technique? Okay, very nice, Giovanna. In a short paragraph, students have to circle action verbs. That's a good one. Another idea, just to circle action verbs. Maybe by showing pictures, so they can see the pictures and they can mention the action verb. It can be another way by underlining, okay, using colors. Excellent. You got the idea. Very nice. Okay, so let's go to the next part. And now, students, we are going to study about didactic strategies in the presentation of the new grammatical structure or vocabulary. Yes? Okay, so let's go with this part. Here, oops, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to talk about contextualization. So contextualization is another technique that you can use especially for vocabulary. Okay? So here, what does contextualization mean? Is by putting language items into a meaningful and real context, rather than being treated as isolating items of language. In other words, let's go to the example. For example, teaching the language used to give advice by looking at problem, okay, at problem pages on teenage magazines. Give the target language context. Contextualization can be as simple as providing an example sentence that uses, okay, that uses here, all right, as preparing, oh, I'm sorry, as preparing a conversation or something like that. In other words, contextualization means to use meaningful phrases, okay, to use the language that the students need because maybe they are going to use that language in the future. For example, instead of teaching them the history of the United States, so you can teach them the history of Peru, all right, by using English. That's a way of contextualization. Another one, maybe if you want to talk about teenagers' problems in Europe, so instead of using this kind of information, you can use Peruvian teenagers' problems. It's more meaningful, you know, because it's part of us. That's contextualization. All right? Okay. And as I told you, the last part for today's class, that is the didactic strategies in the presentation of the new grammar structure of vocabulary. Here, let me show you two kind of strategies that you can use, okay, in the very beginning part of your lessons. One of them is called leading. That's actually a technique. This is a technique used by teachers at the beginning of a presentation to prepare to learn and establish a communicative link between the learnings and the information about to be presented. So here, the leading is a technique. It's the very, it's in the, for example, is when you start the lesson asking some questions, okay, about the topic. So in that case, you are applying the leading technique because this is like an introduction activity that you do before your lesson. Okay? And what about warm-up activities? Teacher, warm-up activities is similar to leading? No way. Because leading is a technique and warm-up is an activity. A warm-up activity is a short, fun game which a teacher can use with the students. So in other words, it's a game, an activity that you use in order to make students feel motivated before starting your lesson plan. Okay, for example, what I usually do with my students is, okay, let's remember the vocabulary we did yesterday, so let's play a game now. So if you start with a game, for example, maybe there are different kind of games. You can use like Tutti Fruit. I use Tutti Fruit in English. You can use ahorcados. This is another kind of games that they love to do. You can put just the spaces on the board and they need to guess the meaning or they need to get the word itself. So this kind of warm-up activities help them to feel motivated, to feel active, especially after another lesson. For example, if they have mathematics before your lesson plan, so maybe they will be a little bored, right? So you can use this kind of activities and you can make students wake up, right? Using a picture, warm-up is a game with a ball, for example. Yes, any game that you use at the very beginning of your lesson is called warm-up activity. Remember that warm-up means to exercise, to feel, how can I say, to feel ready in order to do something else. So warm-up helps you to feel motivated, to feel active before your lesson plan. Motivating activities, yes, like games. For example, you can present some crosswords. You can make them work in groups. They love crosswords, and if you want to put 20 for the first group, they immediately work together. So this is a kind of activity that makes students feel active. Okay, that is a warm-up. But leading is especially the introduction of the topic. Most of the times are questions. Okay? So do you have any questions about leading or warm-up activities? Do you see the difference between them? No questions? Okay, so very good. So if you don't have any questions about our class for today, that's all for today, students. That's all for tonight. Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to be here with you today. I hope you have learned, or at least I hope you have remembered, okay, the things that we usually use in our classrooms. But here we need to learn, the words, okay? Because maybe you can have this kind of things in your exam. So tomorrow we are going to continue with me in our last class, and we are going to do, or we are going to continue talking about different things to teach vocabulary and grammar. Yes, the videos are being uploaded, but not because of me. There are some people who are in charge of that. Yes, but the videos are being uploaded. I promise. Thank you, Rosa. Okay, remember that if you have any questions, if you have extra material, if you have any doubt, sometimes you feel maybe shy to talk in front of the others. So you can feel free and write to me, please. Here I'm gonna write my email. Okay, write to me and I will be glad to help you if I can. Yes, that's my email. And here you have my mobile phone, just in case if you need any help. All right? So thank you very much for your time. That's all for today. Go and relax for a while and remember to read your material. And tomorrow we are going to continue with our final lesson or our final class. Okay? So thank you very much. Goodbye, Ana, Celso, Erika, Rosa, Giovanna, Javier, Maria, Merly, Miguel, Roxana, and teacher Iskra. It was a pleasure to be here with you. God bless you and see you tomorrow at night. Goodbye.